Welcome to Cultural Fluency Makers. I'm your host, David Wellisch. Each week, we welcome leaders to share how they stay ahead of the ever-changing consumer landscape. With today's cultural transformation, top brands need to understand diverse consumer segments from Gen Z, Hispanic, and LGBTQ+, to gamers, wine enthusiasts, and basketball fanatics in Iowa. Their marketing strategies require them to keep the pulse on their consumers, but also their brand in the category to continue to grow revenue for the long term. Cultural Fluency Makers is sponsored by Collage Group, the only cultural intelligence engine that provides brand and consumer insights on the why that drives consumer behavior and purchase decisions. Let's get started. I am especially excited for this episode and to start the week in this way. With me today is someone who turns data into rocket fuel for global business. He's a data analytics leader, a keynote speaker, and an industry competition judge. Whether on stage or behind the scenes, he's influencing how the world thinks about data, from compliance all the way to innovation. He's leading the charge in transforming new businesses, harnessing data to make smarter and faster decisions. With over a decade of experience, he has set industry benchmarks in data governance, built forecasting models that drive efficiency, and developed enterprise frameworks that are now shaping the future of business intelligence. He's the head of analytics and insights for small and medium businesses at Google. Jiaxi Zhu, welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you, David, and super excited to explore this topic from a cultural standpoint.
Fantastic. Well, let's do this. So Yashi, given the cultural and demographic landscape shifts in the country, what role do you believe cultural insights play in the business, in the media business, in the advertiser business?
Yeah, so what I would say, cultural insights today, I think, especially in today's digital economy, I think it has moved beyond, I would say, the traditional notion of culture in terms of, different groups of people and so on and so forth. What I have observed in terms of how companies are engaging customers is that they're embracing this concept of microcultures, where every person and every customer is considered different based on their personal experiences and preferences. So as a result, a lot of the companies, they are no longer just optimizing around averages in terms of looking at data in aggregate and trying to make, I would say, a go-to-market strategy or a product decision that's tailored to a large group of customers. Instead, I think since I would say the early 2010s, people have started to really optimize their data around personalization. So delivering personal experiences and products that specifically cater to, I would say, the personal needs and experiences of the customers. So obviously, a lot of the data will be at the intersection of culture, what market or what type of experiences the type of customer has, and then also the evolving market dynamics around that. And in order to stay competitive, a lot of the companies are harnessing that data.
That's great. And why, Yashi, there's so much data, right? And you guys at Google, you're at the center of this. Why culture? Why do you think culture is important? Why cultural insights? There's so many types of insights.
So I think, obviously culture matters very differently depending on the company. Within the context of Google, Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And this mission, mission is quite timeless, and it inherently requires a really deep understanding of a global user base that has a different way of using and engaging with internet products. And I believe, it's the case with a lot of other companies out there who has a global customer base or user base. What I mean by that is, if you talk about a customer from one part of the world and again versus the other, they may have very different purchasing behaviors, or even preferences, or even ways they use sort of the same product for. So one example is, if you look at what people search on Google, various people, they search for different things. Even within, I would say, the same age group, within the same cultural subgroup, they search for different things. And one of the most important things around that is, depending on what's top of mind for these people, you will want to tailor whatever your offerings are so that you meet those needs. And this is not just for consumer-facing brands, but also for businesses, right? So one example is, in my role at Google, we serve a lot of small businesses around the world, millions of. And the businesses, they have different things top of mind. One example is that, in the West, a lot of the activity happens over the Christmas and New Year's holidays, but that may not be the case when you talk about a different part of the world where, for example, things are more optimized around mid-year. And part of that is also because of the cultural differences in terms of how people like to spend and purchase.
That's great. Thank you, Yash. I mean, you have such a privileged role in the inside the world of, or the intersection of, data, consumers, digital. What would you say is the role of cultural intelligence at Google? And I know that's a big question.
Mhm.
Um, what yeah, what comes to mind?
Yeah. So as I'm obviously, Google is a very large company. So if you talk to me versus if you were to talk to, let's say, a product manager or engineer, you would get very different answers. So I can talk about it more from a go-to-market and how we serve small businesses around the world, just to going off of what I started on. So one thing is, I would say cultural insights are accounted for when we develop our go-to-market strategies, which is, what is the best way to reach the customers, the businesses that advertise on Google, and what their customer journeys look like, and even how, we reach the customers. One example is many companies who, advertise on Google in, let's say, in the US or Europe, they are very formal in terms of how they want to be reached. They are very focused on emails, setting up formal meetings, and so on and so forth. Whereas if you talk about a customer who is, let's say, in parts of Asia or India, I think their focus is more on real-time communication. That's where, for example, a lot of the customer engagement happens over WhatsApp or even local chat apps, where it's more fluid. The questions are more, I would say, more day to day. So that's one, I would say, very specific example on how Google engages customers different. The others is, there's also regional strategies that are set up. So the teams that engage with those customers are also local teams that that speak the local language, know the local customers, and there are local strategies and roadmaps that support this. So one example, as I mentioned, there's a lot of focus on the sort of the holiday season in the West, whereas, for example, in parts of Asia, it's a lot around Lunar New Year because that's when people celebrate and start to purchase stuff.
That's great. So it seems like what I'm hearing is that culture for you is at the center of need, of customer
Hmm.
need. Right, that culture impacts so deeply how customers do what they do or what they need, and so therefore it's about meeting customer need. Um, how important do you think is for consumer organizations um, to get this cultural intelligence thing right?
Yeah, I think it's very important. It's not just about, selling more stuff or, increasing your revenue faster. I think in some sense, it's also ensuring that your brand stays relevant to the evolving customer base. And even in some cases, making sure that you respect various different cultures, especially, for example, if you're If the brand is, let's say, serving or advertising in, I would say, a cultural sensitive area, I think that could even make or break the brand if you do it right or wrong. So in this case, I think a lot of the customer slash consumer facing organizations, uh, for them, data is extremely important. As you see, a lot of the decisions and the customer outreach are data driven. And uh, you know, the whatever is in the data determines how you know the customers and how you want to engage with them. Obviously, no company has the time to know every single customer inside out. So data is, I would say, the most important way to make this scalable. But there are some risks in terms of using data directly to, to try to come up with, I would say, an understanding of customers, because sometimes the data can be biased in itself. So let me take one example. I think in one of my past consulting engagements with the financial services company, they were looking into using some data set for automating their credit scoring. Obviously, this needs to be personalized because everybody has a different risk profile. But in the data itself, there are risks where, for example, historical practices in lending could reflect in biases. So historically, a lot of the lending are based on zip codes. So there are certain zip codes that some financial services companies flag as higher risk, maybe because of some demographic spread or something like that. That makes it sort of biased in that, the new data set still says that some certain zip codes or areas are still higher risk, obviously, which is very unfair to whoever resides in those regions. And this is one example of a data bias that that the companies will have to wade through to come up with a more, I would say, more nuanced view of the customer.
It's great. So I meet many marketing and insights executives throughout, and in all cases, when we ask how important is cultural relevance to win hearts and mind of consumers, the answer is, it is paramount, and it's so much what a marketer ultimately needs to do. Uh, I'm curious, how do you define cultural relevance or cultural fluency, which at Collage, that's how we've coined it, and how do you think you become one in the marketplace?
From my personal standpoint, I would say for a consumer facing company, I would say cultural fluency is really understanding your customers at a personal level and building a very personalized experience and customer journey around that, so that the customer not only gets the product, but also maximizes his or her experience and value with the brand. So what this means, it does mean that, some of the traditional approaches will still work, which is, segmenting your customer base based on data analytics frameworks, and adapt that model to evolving cultural signals. So that's one important aspect, which is cultural signals are never static, especially with the rise of social media and things that go viral. A lot of things can change within a few days or even hours. So it's extremely important for the brands to be responsive and on top on what's trending, what are some of the key cultural discussions happening, both online and offline, and how can we take advantage of that to get closer to our customers. On top of this, as I mentioned, a lot of the engagements are also at the personal level. So brands should achieve that by combining real-time data. So one example is I was building this recommendation system for an auto company in the past, and they were trying to come up with some sort of personalization, product personalization for their customers. I would say one major innovation there is the real-time ingestion of actual real-time engagement data between the sales representative and the customer, so that it automatically feeds into their customer recommendation system, and any real-time insight that the sales rep captures on the ground will be reflected in what products and services are being recommended. I would say this is a pretty significant step forward because with the static approaches, it's very, very hard to capture nuanced data, like, what the customer really, what the customer is really looking for, what are some of the unique challenges he or she is facing. And this is something that's probably better done by a human. And in terms of human interaction, a lot of that happens offline. So that brings up another, I would say, key area, which is how to combine your online and offline touch points to come up with, I would say, a 360-degree view of your customer.
Um, Very interesting. So do you, given that, Yashi, I would assume that you would say that it is getting easier and easier or more possible to get cultural intelligence right, to get cultural insights right, given the quality of data, the frequency of data, and the mechanisms to access data? Is that
Yeah,
fair?
I would say today it is definitely more accessible in terms of what is out there in terms of raw data that people can ingest and analyze. But I would also caution that some of the data is noise, especially to my earlier point. Some of the cultural shifts happen so quickly, or maybe they come and go so quickly, so that sometimes when you actually ingest the
Yeah,
data and analyze it and formalize everything, it's already over. So, so it's also super important to not just rely on the data, but use it as sort of a directional sense. And it's also much better used if it's combined, as I mentioned, combined with qualitative insights from on the ground engagements.
that's great. Yeah, it's a mix. It must be a mix. So, Yashi, with your work at Google, you're in a unique position to see how data shapes business decisions at scale. How have you seen advanced analytics unlock deeper consumer insights that actually drive brand differentiation, strategy, and maybe ultimately brand love?
Yeah. So I would say from a data analytics standpoint, this is obviously a very, I would say, very relatively mature area nowadays. I think analytics has gone through a pretty long journey from moving from descriptive to prescriptive, and then even predictive analytics around culture. So in the past, I'm talking about many years ago, people potentially, as I mentioned, were just optimizing around the averages. They do some very, I would say, rough slicing and dicing, and they look at maybe a 2 by 2 matrix or 3 by 3, and say, these are the potential people. And then, we move on to some more advanced, approaches, like clustering approaches that sort of pick up some of the signals that sort of the descriptive view doesn't really sort of pick up. And now we're even moving beyond that, right? So apart from just understanding which customers look similar, we're getting more and more at the individual level, understanding what makes the customer different. And then even coming up with, I would say, more prescriptive recommendations as for knowing that the customer has this type of profile, experience, and background. What is the best way to engage? And as I mentioned, within this process, the data foundation becomes super important, both in terms of what data is collected and also how it is being managed. Because if the data is collected in a way that is inconsistent or cannot be sort of easily linked to other parts of the customer, then it becomes not usable, and probably it's probably better not even to collect it if we can use it, right? So apart from that, I would say there are certain other techniques in terms of uh, the infrastructure foundations, as I mentioned, sort of the uh, multi touch point nature of the customer journey does require uh, a more holistic view on how data is being looked at. As I mentioned, a lot of the engagements are online nowadays across different platforms. So sometimes people let's say, start their purchasing journey searching on maybe Google, Amazon, or maybe even an online forum. And then they navigate, let's say, to either the brand's website or to like another web, let's say Amazon or whatever, where the brand is being sold. And then they may do some research in some cases if it's a significant purchase. They might go to talk to their friends offline, right? Or they might talk to some of the people they know who use this product. And sometimes they might go into the store and check it out to see whether it really works. And then they make that purchasing decision. And even after the decision, the journey hasn't ended. They'll use it, and let's say if they're not satisfied, they'll return it, and they have to restart, I would say, the research again. So in this case, as you see, there's a lot of different data points along the way, both on different websites or maybe different apps, but also offline in the stores and everywhere else. So how do you make sure you capture that to understand what the customer is really looking for and what type of research or purchasing stage he or she is in? Because depending on whether the customer is just trying to do research or whether their customer is actually made up their mind to buy, I think it's a very different approach to engage with them.
Powerful. I mean, the journeys are complex, and I think for those that can deeply understand it, track it, and service it, I'm sure that's predictive to winning that customer and that consumer. Obviously, we'll get to AI. We must. How could we? How could we not if we're talking about data? So so many brands talk about being data driven. But what does that really look like when it comes to understanding consumer behavior? Can you share an example of how, like, maybe smart data use led to a meaningful shift in how a brand connects with its audience? I know you've given us already examples.
So I would say, just when we talk about AI, I would say one of the most important things to mention at this point, hopefully I'm wrong, maybe a couple years down the road, is that not all customer engagement use cases are prime time for AI at this point. There's a lot of news reports about AI making errors and misunderstanding something. So that's why I think companies have to be very strategic about where to deploy it versus where not to deploy it. I would say one of the potential, I would say, approaches I've seen that could work is that we still have some human to engage with the customers directly, but at the same time we augment, I would say, the sort of the salesperson or the customer engagement representative with an AI tool for example, to provide real time recommendations on what to pitch or what to say or how to answer a certain question from a customer. And then obviously then we have a second layer, which is the salesperson actually making the judgment on whether to take the recommendation from the AI system or not. So this way there is, I would say, this extra layer of protection in case the AI makes some mistake, then there's still this chance that, the customer engagement person is able to fix it. At the same time, for some of the more complex customers, you still want to put in front of them an actual person rather than, I would say, a chatbot to serve. Now, I would say the other thing to the point that I just made, which is AI needs to be humanized. It should not come across as any traditional chatbot where it's more of an question and answer. You ask something and they provide you with some options to choose. It needs to be humanized by embedding some of the contextual awareness of the conversation and then also some of the bias mitigation mitigation tools. So a few examples. One example that I mentioned is using AI to empower the salespeople. That there's a lot of talk around AIs being used to completely replace, I would say, customer engagement teams. Even though that might be happening, I would say to some extent in the industry, I don't see a world where that's happening, I would say, overnight, where everybody is going to be replaced by the AI system. As I mentioned, I think in many use cases, AI is being used as an enabler rather than a full replacement of this human touch to sales and customer.
Yashi, so eloquently said. What are some of the most dramatic impacts that you have seen?
Yeah. So I would say from an impact standpoint, I think there is, I would say, in general, obviously this is not time tested since across the industry, AI is just picking up in its actual deployment. But I would say some of the main areas of impact is, first of all, it does make, I would say, the companies more productive in terms of how they reach and engage customers. So previously, the customer engagement team may have to do hours and hours of research on the customers, and AI sort of makes that happen within a matter of maybe minutes or maybe 15 minutes, right? On top of this, as I mentioned, AI is also providing more options on the table in terms of how sales teams choose to engage with customers. Depending on the historical engagement of the customer, the AI can provide some really good recommendations that potentially people can't just think of in the moment. Obviously, people can think of it if you give them more time to think about it, but in a lot of those customer-facing conversations, you'll have to come up with something to say in the moment, and AI is great at that. And that could, potentially improve customer satisfaction, and potentially, if it's a long-term business type of thing, it also helps build long-term relationships and trust as well. And then finally, what I would say is, I would say AI is making things more, I would say, more efficient in general enabling sort of the reach of a wider customer base. Because no matter how big the brand is, and how far and wide you scale up your stores or websites and so on and so forth, there will be a subset of customers that you cannot talk to with a real person. Even especially if you're a global business serving millions of people. In this case, using AI to at least getting some of the basic questions covered, I think will dramatically increase, I would say, the base and also the reach of the brand in a more meaningful way, rather than having people to do multiple rounds of research on their own and potentially encountering incorrect information from third parties.
Great. Well, listen, thank you very much, Jiaxi, for all of your kernels of wisdom in the world of so important data, technology, consumer. So we just learned from you, and now we're going to spend a couple of minutes learning a little bit about you. And so, what are the things that inspire you and motivate you to do what you do?
Yeah, I would say professionally, I'm most motivated by the challenge of just translating something that's extremely complex and convoluted into something that's simple and clear. And personally, I've found that using data is a great way to do it, and folks have other ways to do it. But for me, data is the more, I would say, authentic and instinctive, I would say, vehicle for me to achieve that. On top of this, from a process standpoint, I really enjoy engagement as part of my job, both in terms of engaging with the content, the cross-functional teams that I work with, but also, out there and, engaging with the broader industry as I'm currently doing in this podcast.
Well, this skill set of simplifying the complex, I think is going to be such an important skill in the years to come. Things are getting more complex, but ultimately we need to consume and translate it all into simple ways and tell stories. So that's great. And if you could travel back in time and give your young self, your 20-year-old self advice, what would that be?
Yeah, back then, obviously, I was not this far along in my career, and I did not know much about how data works. But obviously, I would not give myself the tip to learn more data. But what I would do is, what I would say to my younger self is, go with the flow. Control what I could control, and put my best forward and hope for the best results. There's a lot of things that's uncontrollable. As we just discussed, even in the context of companies, right? They can control what they see, what they know about the customer, the data that they see. But there are a lot of things that they just can't control, like cultural shifts. I think that's just much a wider thing than just how you fine tune your strategy. So embrace the unknown and then go with the flow.
Fantastic. I'm sure that 20-year-olds will really find that useful and take it to heart. And the last question of the morning, what do you do for fun outside of
Yeah.
work?
So my wife and I, we recently got a dog. Her name is Chestnut, so we play with her a lot. And I get a lot of fun out of it. She's growing up really quickly. So she's a golden doodle, and she just grew from 7 pounds to 24 pounds. So she's a really big girl now. And then I also enjoy running. I run about 4 to 5 times a week in the park. I feel that's a very I would say that's the time that I actually have, go out and reflect about my work, my life, and nobody's really sort of bothering me there. On top of this, I also actually like cleaning. So I like to clean my place,
Ooh.
once in a while because I feel it's a very meditative experience to see, especially when I'm vacuuming the floor, seeing, the place getting cleaner. And while cleaning, I'm usually listening to some podcast or music, just to reflect on some of the things that I went through over the week as well.
Well, Yashi, congrats. I will share that I also have a mini golden doodle. His name is Santi,
Oh,
and
cool.
he's about 10. So enjoy because they're it's been really fun to share the journey with him. And on the cleaning side, I think my wife will be jealous. So I'm not gonna share this one with her. That is awesome. Well, listen, Yashi, thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your wisdom with us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, David, for having me.
And this has been another exciting episode of Cultural Fluency Makers. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Cultural Fluency Makers. Thank you for joining us. Please share your comments and what you would like to hear more about. Be as specific as possible. For show notes and more, please visit culturalfluencymakers.com. This show is proudly sponsored by Collage Group, unleashing the power of cultural intelligence to fuel brand growth. Please follow Collage Group on LinkedIn, and we will see you next week.